As a watchmaker in a professional workshop, I have the benefit of having really nice Swiss-made or German-made top quality watchmaking tools. And I always look at that as taking a little bit of the question mark out of doing something, knowing that you have the right, perfect, fancy, expensive tool that you know is going to help you do a good job. But on the other side of the spectrum, the more you know, the more you can actually try using different tools or making your own tools or buying inexpensive tools and figuring out how to make them work the way you need them to work. So as a little challenge, I decided I was going to try to find some inexpensive watchmaking tools and see how good they are. See if I can make them work for a full service. Take apart a watch, do the repairs, put it back together, and see if they frustrate me as much as I think they will. It'll also be a neat experience because maybe there are some hobbyists out there that want to try taking apart a watch movement, but don't want to invest thousands of dollars in expensive Swiss-made tools. Hopefully I'll be able to see what tools are okay and what tools are better than okay, even for being inexpensive and easily found on whatever Amazon.com or any website I can find that'll have an inexpensive basic watchmaking toolkit. So I'm going to try Amazon.com and see if I can get everything there. I feel like that's going to be my best option to try and find everything in one spot. So most of this looks like casing and bracelet tools. Not so many movement specific tools. So this will be for changing bracelets, sizing bracelets, replacing straps, and removing case backs, things like that. But I don't see much in here that is going to work on a movement of a watch, at least on the first page here. But here we go, we have some hand setting tools, some really interesting magnifying glasses here. Hey, they even make a knockoff version of Bergeon Rodico for cleaning. Hand removal tools, screwdrivers. We might be able to get everything here. This hand setting tool here, you get 3 different tools, each with 2 tips, and it's only $6.59. The Swiss equivalent to this tool, I would probably pay $25 for each tool. But a set of screwdrivers for $13.95 is an amazing deal. Swiss equivalent would be a few $100s for a good set of screwdrivers. This set of tweezers would be a few $100s if it was coming from Switzerland. Alright, I'm going to go a little more in depth than just watchmaking tools and try to select the things that I think I will need for a standard maintenance service on a watch. Here we go. 13-piece jeweler screwdriver set for $9.99. I can have it tomorrow. That's perfect. Size range from 0.6 to 2 millimeter. Even has replacement blades. I'll search just for brass tweezers, see if I can find something. Here's some interesting tweezers. Just precision tweezers. Marketed for craft and electronics, jewelry making. Non-magnetic is good. That way you don't have to deal with magnetization of parts, because that'll cause issues with timing. I think these should be good. Fine tip straight, These are long, which is not really necessary, but it doesn't look like they are that much longer. Not to the point where they'd be cumbersome. And only $6.69. The tweezers I use that these would replace cost around $60. So now we can handle the parts. We can unscrew the parts and rescrew the parts. We're going to need a way to oil the parts. So to service a watch, we're going to need to at least have a light oil, a thicker oil, and then we're also going to need escapement oil. Now for grease, we could just take that grease and put it in another little cup. So you'd be fine with a dish of 3. The grease, you could even take it right out of the grease container. So I think something like this would be perfect. The black oiler is going to be the one that you use the most. But black and red are good. Yellow and blue might be too large. $10. We're going to need a way to get the hands off the watch. And then we're going to need a way to get the hands back on the watch. Yeah, as long as we can fit a movement in there. Yeah, as long as you're not working on pocket watches or big pocket watches, this should be fine. This will be good for wristwatches. For $8.96. I have a hand setting press and also some hand tools. I think they were well over $1,000 for those tools, and here $8.96. Definitely get that one. We're going to need some way to open the watch. So one of those casing kits might come in handy. So we've got spring bar tools, which will be good for getting the strap off. We got case back tools. Yeah, so something like this would come in handy opening most watches. I'm going to do this one. $28. So now we'll need some way to hold the movement while we work on it. So this is for when you're actually working on the movement, not for when you're putting hands on the watch or casing up or uncasing. This is for movements only. One thing I don't see in this kit is a case cushion, which is going to be helpful for casing up and uncasing a watch. 2 case cushions here. And it appears this one is good enough for Patek Philippe, so it's good enough for me. We could look at watchmaking oils. So this looks like they're using the Swiss oils from Mobius and putting them into some smaller containers for you. And it is only $43. Not sure how much you get. It looks like 0.2 milliliters. So it's a very small amount, but you don't need a lot. And that'll be for Swiss oils that are synthetic. So this would be a good buy. We've got brushes that we'll use to clean the movement in denatured alcohol. We've got finger cuts so that we don't get fingerprints and finger oils and things on the watch parts. We've got a little package of watch oils. I've got some levers for taking off a cannon pinion and also could be used for taking off watch hands. We've got our loops and loop holder that will allow it to stay on my head without falling off. We've got a hand pulling tool. We've got a hand pressing tool. We've got oilers and an oiler dish that will hold a few different types of oil in it. We have some bamboo tweezers, which I'm really interested to try out. We also have some precision stainless tweezers. And we also have a 13-piece set of micro precision watchmaker screwdrivers. And the total price is $198.20. This one's actually quite nice. A little bit smaller than the one I normally use. That's the more expensive Swiss tool. But it's nice and soft so your hands won't get tired. So these ones are made in China, steel, non-magnetic precision tweezers. And they actually look pretty good. Better to start with a finer tip like this and then modify that instead of starting with a really blunt, wide tip that's not going to work very well and having to then thin that out. It's a little trickier to do that than to take something that's really sharp like this and then file down the tip of it to make it a little more blunt. And this was an oiler set and also a little tray for the different oils to be put into. Yeah, this will be a perfect little tray to put our oils for when we need to access them. Nice and smooth. There's really no problem with this at all. Quality doesn't look so great on these. I'm kind of interested to take a file to this and see if that's a plating that's on the steel, and maybe they're using a steel that could potentially rust. These ones say made in Switzerland on them, right on the side. But I don't believe that. Packaging says made in China back here, but the parts say made in Switzerland. And then they have every language on the packaging other than Mandarin. Here's our little watch hand tool kit. This one will allow us to hopefully take the hands off of a watch successfully, and also put the hands back onto a watch successfully. It's not great to have that much wiggling and play in this. Yeah, that's not ideal. So you might actually be better off with just a regular hand tool, which I believe we also got some of those in here somewhere. There's a hand puller in order to pull the hands off of a watch. I mean, aside from poor alignment, I think it's a decent tool that should work, but you just have to make sure you align that center pin so it doesn't end up going off to the side when you're trying to pull hands off. Here's our cloche. It was actually a 2-pack that was really inexpensive. It's not quite round, but it shouldn't matter. This is the watch repair kit that was a full, like a folio full of watchmaking tools. A lot of these were specific to bracelet changes, strap changes, things like that. Exterior watch work instead of the inside of the watch. And I think there were some tools in here for opening the case back as well. Eventronic. Strange name for watchmaking tools. There's a tiny little microfiber. And the reason I'm smelling it is it feels a little thick. And so I thought maybe there's a polishing paste that's been put in here and then it dries in there, and it could be used as a polishing cloth, in which case you would never want to use it on a crystal to clean a crystal, especially if that crystal has any kind of anti-reflective coating on it. You'll polish it away. These look like they were just stamped from sheet metal and then welded on the back here. So they got pretty rough edges. I wouldn't use those on any watch parts or watch movement parts. But then you've also got these ones here, which I think they have designed with the intention of hammering and driving out pins. Might not be such a good idea. I think you might damage something doing it that way. This here will be for putting a bracelet in there, and it'll raise the bracelet off so that you could hammer a pin on a bracelet down, and then it will be able to stick out through one of these holes. If you just had your bracelet on the counter and you tried to drive the pin out, the pin has nowhere to go. So this gives you some holes to drive the pin into, and it also helps you hold the bracelet straight up and down. So these are kind of useful. So on a snapback case back, you need some way to snap the case back onto the watch. So they're marketing this as that tool. And it should work just fine, but it might also be able to set crystals. Feels very lightweight. Usually these tools are very heavy. It's an interesting design because they've designed it in such a way where they intend to have you kind of use it in your hand almost. They've given this other grip here, which is not standard. Normally you would have this sitting down, you'd place your watch in there, and then you'd press down to snap it. So this spring-loaded thing is a little interesting to me. It's not standard. These levers are extremely rough. I would polish these before using them, definitely. The shape is a little strange. They're a little thick. But it's metal, and as long as it's not a plated metal, I should be able to reshape them and polish them to work a lot better. Here's my loops. Got a whole kit of loops and one loop holder. The glass is a little bit loose in these. I don't think the magnification on these is accurate, but it shouldn't matter. You'll just know this one's more magnification, the 15x, 10, 5, 3x. So if we work with the 5x, we'll want to snap this in here. And then this is really oddly coiled up. Probably have to reshape that. But it'll do. These case cushions I'd be really careful with. The metal ring they've put on here is so rough and unfinished that you could probably cut yourself on it. And also, there are metal flakes coming off of it. They basically took a chrome-plated piece of steel. It was a tube, and they chopped them off, and they didn't do anything after that. So you've got chrome plating that's coming off. Here's our screwdriver set. So it does come with some Phillips screwdrivers, which are useless in watchmaking, unless you're working on really inexpensive, cheap quartz watches. You might find some of those on case backs. So that immediately limits me because 5 of my screwdrivers here are using Phillips. Before working on a watch, these blades definitely need to be fixed. The blades are also not being held square to the tool, so the blades are kind of curving, coming out of the end of the screwdriver. So there's definitely risks that you have to think about when you're going to use these on a watch. This one showed up with a bent blade, just from packaging. But that blade looks like it was pretty much garbage anyway. The screwdriver tip is not even identifiable as a screwdriver tip, to be honest. It has one side that is properly ground and the other side is pretty much straight. So Looks more like a wedge. This is interesting. So this is that watchmaking putty. That would be a Rodico replacement. It is half the price of Rodico. But each one of these is half the size of Rodico. So the Swiss Rodico from Bergeon is actually the same price as this. Yeah, we'll see if it works as well as Rodico, or if it leaves any residue when we're working. And I couldn't find any wood tip tweezers that were reasonably priced, so I just bought these bamboo tweezers, which were really inexpensive. I mean, the alignment is horrible. The tips are different sizes on top and bottom. They don't feel even. They're kind of like this. But I think they'll work for what I need them to do, which is handling watch bridges without scratching them. I'll just want to file them a little bit so that they align a little better. This is neat. They even copied the little Bergeon boxes that are yellow. And it looks like they're using similar part numbers as well. They look a little rough, but I think they'll do the job just fine. We'll see when we put a watch movement in there if they're nice and stable. Now I'm looking at the prices again, and I feel like I might have been overly critical on these tools because they're all under $10. Except for the loops, they were $13 for 4 loops and the headpiece. And then the watch kit was $28. The only thing that really was a letdown, these case cushions, I think I would just not use them. I would find a way to not use them, basically. Put it on anything else. Put a cloth out or something. Use it as a case cushion. I think these are garbage. Then these oilers were a bit odd. We'll see if it's brass that they used or if it's plating on top of a cheap steel. But other than that, for the price, I think this is great. So these screwdrivers definitely need to be filed in order to fit the different screw heads. So I'm going to pick out the ones that I want to use, and then I'll go ahead and file them all and fit them to each individual screw before I even attempt to take anything apart. Otherwise, I'll damage all the screws, and even worse, a screw blade could slip out of a screw and scratch a bridge. I'm going to start with the ones that are too thin because they look parallel at least. Because I was just filing, so I don't want any metal shavings to be on my finger cuts. Even though we're going to clean this movement, we still want to limit the amount of damage we could do with metal shavings getting in there right now. A little tight in there. So now we have our movement uncased. I basically used one of these because these are quite thick, and this one was too thick to get underneath the second hand, and I saw that this one is a little bit thinner, so I was able to use one prong, so half of this, to get nicely and safely under the hand, right by the post or the tube, and then lever up. I used just a piece of Ziploc bag that was cut in order to keep the bottom of the tool from touching the dial and protect the dial. You just replace this every once in a while because it does get holes every time you use it. You can end up with a little hole in it. But I also am very happy that I high polished the bottom side of the tool because that keeps it from scratching the dial. So the bottom side I paid particular attention to get it perfect and nice high polish on there. The tops, I just took down the burrs and thinned it out a little bit, but the bottoms I focused on because that is what is going to be actually levering against the dial to pull a hand off. Same thing here, we can use the thinner tool if the dial seems to be a little stuck on there, and go gently in there, very gently, so you don't scratch anything. Now you get your dial. Put our crown back in. So these wood tweezers are a little tough. They're quite strong, so it takes some strength, which I don't like having to do that. It just makes it a little tougher to have good control. So I'll switch between the steel ones and the wood ones, depending on how precise I need to be to pick up a small part. And these ones for larger parts that really need protection from being scratched by the steel. Got my movement holder. I'll need the big side because I'm working on a very large movement. And there's some little sharp edges in here where it's going to clamp down on the movement, just so I don't get little points poking into the edge of the main plate. There's still rough corners down here, but I'm not going to use this surface. I'm going to put my movement on the top portion of it. This one needs a little more, but the others are good. Feels pretty stable in there. Should be good. So I don't really want to use this set of metal tweezers to grab that metal part because I could really easily scratch the top surface. So I'm going to try to use these wooden tweezers even though they're a little cumbersome. Then I'm going to see if these will drop off. Oh, there we go. And it's always a good idea if you're trying to get something, instead of dragging it along a bridge, if you don't have a good set of tweezers to pick it up very carefully, you can always tip the movement and just have it fall. It's much safer than scraping around on a movement if you don't have the right tool. Underneath this. This is an inexpensive tool that I made. It has a German silver or nickel silver tip, and then it's just a piece of plastic. Drilled a hole in the end of it, and I shoved this small piece of metal that is soft metal into it. The soft metal won't scratch bridges, won't scratch your wheels, won't damage things. I highly recommend something like this. Even if it's just the plastic part and you just file it into a point. So imagine this plastic piece filed into a point so that you can touch things and move things with a smaller point, because I have to take this cap jewel out. And you don't want to do it with a set of steel tweezers because you'll damage all the parts and scratch everything. Can't do it with your screwdriver, you'll scratch things. You should not do it with an oiler because you'll scratch things. So you either need a very small toothpick, something that is soft, in order to do this. A toothpick would probably be the easiest thing and quickest thing to grab, and then just file it down to something really small so you can get in there and open up the spring and drop out the cap jewel. Now that it's out, you can grab it with your tweezers. I would not use these for that because it'll shoot out and you'll lose it forever. You can also take your toothpick or your piece of wood and cut it into a little prying wedge here, because you don't want to use a metal screwdriver in here to pop a bridge off. You will scratch the bridges and the main plate. A piece of wood will not scratch or damage the parts. Looks like I have some magnetism with this screw sticking on there. Yeah, this is not good. It's a big problem. Can't get them demagnetized. And for some reason, won't be demagnetized by my demagnetizer. But we can work through it. It'll just be a little trickier. And then at the end, before timing the movement out, just need to make sure to demagnetize the whole movement. so that there are no timing errors, because this screwdriver can cause parts to become magnetic. And we don't want that. So our arbor does not want to come free from the bridge. There we go. Basically, this barrel arbor had gotten stuck in the bridge there. Can use the steel tweezers. This one still has the cannon pinion on the other side, so we can't take it out yet. But we could take all the other wheels out gently. Don't grab on the wheel with the steel tweezers because they will scratch. Now, I had forgotten that this tool has the center pin there. It's more for removing hands. So I might actually prefer to use these for the cannon pinion. But I might be able to go in here on the side. This might actually work, even with that center pin. Yep. So even with the center pin, these will still do the job on the cannon pinion, even a large cannon pinion like this. So that worked, which is good because trying to pry up with these would be tricky. Those tools worked surprisingly well for disassembly. I just had to break out these two little homemade items, and you could use a toothpick instead of this. Take the other cap tool out, and then we can start cleaning. So first, I want to clean my hairspring and balance wheel, and I'll do that by putting it back on the main plate. So now I can put this in there and my hairspring will be safe. And I'll just touch the balance, not the hairspring, and this agitation will help clean the balance wheel, the balance pivots, the hairspring. So I can take the main plate, put it back in there because we'll clean that separately. Go like this so I can get that hairspring dry. This part you just have to be very delicate with and take your time. So that'll be a pre-clean, and then I'll do fresh denatured alcohol for these parts. So I got my oil in here, a thicker oil, thinner oil, escapement grease, and then some grease for setting mechanisms. I also have this little piece of pith wood, which is inexpensive anyway. That can be gotten on Amazon. I use that to dip the oilers to clean them a little bit in between changing oils. I also polished up the tips of these oilers, and I still can't really tell what material they're made from with that golden color. That magnetism causing me trouble. That worked surprisingly well. These bend really easy. Okay, so these must be some sort of a copper alloy. They're really soft because I just bent it by wiping it, and then I dipped it in here to clean any lint and residue. And it's fine, you just have to know that they'll bend quite easy. Now I notice this Rodico leaves a pretty nasty residue. And I remember it was not any cheaper than Bergeon Rodico. There's a little bit of what looked like some residue on the corner of that. And by using the Rodico, all it did was really spread it around. So I wouldn't suggest buying any of that. There's Rodico on my tweezers. That's not good. So we're gonna want it like that. So the crown is not touching the red plate. Otherwise the movement will be tilted up. Alright, I'm not real happy with these, with this hand setting. Now, if I had a thin set of tweezers, I could do this with the tweezers, but it's a little trickier with this giant set of tweezers. Ooh. So after going through that, I think I ended up selecting a pretty good batch of tools. I was not really happy with those wood tweezers. I really think I would splurge and go ahead and get a set of brass tweezers, even though there's not a cheap alternative. The other thing I would do is stay away from that hand press. I would just get regular manual hand presses. They look like little pens, and you have two different tips on either side. The press itself is just poorly made, and all of the tips need to be fixed up, and that was probably the lowest quality tool that I had here. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with it. One of the screwdrivers was magnetized, and I could not demagnetize it, which was a little bit of a bummer. But worst case scenario, you can always, after assembly, demagnetize your watch parts before you do any timing. Overall, it went pretty smooth. No damaged parts, no tools broke, nothing was a complete failure. I'm happily surprised. The only tool that I think I would keep over the Swiss tools I've already got would be this little one. I really like that it fits in my palm. It's easy. It's a very soft rubber, so it didn't make my hand tired. I really like this one. I would keep this instead of the more expensive Swiss alternative. Other than that, I would stick with my Swiss tools, but this for the price. I did forget to mention this brush. Almost useless. The bristles were just falling out. So I would not use these brushes. I would find another brush, maybe just like a kid's paintbrush set would probably work too. These ones were not great. That was a pretty fun episode, being able to go through these tools and see what works and what didn't work. I had been thinking about this episode for a long time. So hopefully you all liked it and enjoyed seeing these inexpensive tools in use, figuring out what's worth it and what's not worth it. And I'm actually going to pack these tools up and send them off to somebody. So stay tuned if you're interested in possibly making these tools your tools.